webinars for a long time at this point. We're going to take about an hour. I have some slides to present and then time for Q&A. If you have a question during the presentation or after, you can type your question in the Q&A. Just make sure you're clicking on Q&A and not chat. That will post, and either we have our Global Experience Office staff on the line. They will either respond to your question individually or call it out to the larger group at the end. So we are glad to have you. And this is also being posted live on YouTube and can be returned to as a recording. So my name is Erin Bell. I'm the director of the Global Experience Office, which is the office that administers all off-campus programming for projects, as well as other traveling groups like our clubs or some of our athletics teams that travel internationally. So the Global Experience Office administers the application process for the IQP, which is one of our largest programs that travels off campus. And we are in the middle of that application process right now. So this is primarily directed at the class of 2024, those students who are currently sophomores or in their second year at WPI, who are eligible to apply for IQP next year. So just as a reminder, some things that we were able to do this year and we were really excited about. Not only did we open the application process at the beginning of this term, but we just hosted our in-person global fair last week. You may have talked to your student about this experience. So if your student was not able to attend, they did not miss out on the information they need. Mainly, we see the Global Fair as a great opportunity to celebrate the off-campus program, to see the breadth and depth of the opportunities available, and, you know, in this case, really to have some in-person contact, which we are all craving, and it was just a really nice day. Kind of windy, but a nice day. So you can see in the picture here, we have a passport that we give out to students with some informational materials. They can meet with directors and find out more steps to apply. Like I said, this is online as well. So some other places that we're communicating with students include our weekly newsletter. All students are receiving the newsletter. If your student hasn't seen it, they may want to check their junk mail. But for the most part, I think it is getting through to the class year listservs. We have a video series of short videos, about 5 minutes each, that are posted online, and I'll give you the link there for how to apply. Then we have our e-projects. So e-projects is password protected. It is for students to apply and look at the final details of the projects. But if there are questions that you have, you can certainly talk with your student about where they find those questions. So just some reminders, this is the last event of our Global Fair series. So you can see the other events that we've held on Plus Global Fair 2021. The place to find everything about what to do is Plus Off-Campus IQP. And then for students, they can access eProjects at eprojects.wpi.edu. So just for a real brief introduction, the IQP is what's called the Interactive Qualifying Project. It is a graduation requirement for all students, and they do have the opportunity to complete their IQP off campus or on campus. And I can explain kind of how that works into the academic schedule. Most students complete their IQP on a team of 3 to 4 students. And if they're traveling off campus, they're traveling typically with 2 advisors, 2 faculty advisors, who are with the group for the whole term. So our typical size of an off-campus program is 24 students and 2 faculty. We look at the IQP as the opportunity to solve problems that are at the intersection of society and technology. So these are not major specific problems. These are real world issues that real world sponsors are working through and would like the help of our students on. So I generally refer to it kind of as a mini consulting project, a way for students to use the strengths of each person on the team and bring those strengths together to solve a problem and deliver either a recommendation or an initial result to their sponsors. Last year, 86% of graduates completed at least one of their projects off campus. That would be either the IQP, MQP, or humanities project. The large portion of students, the large majority, are the IQP experience. It typically happens in the junior year, which is when most students expect, an off-campus experience. So we've broken down the application process for students into 3 steps: explore, prepare, and apply. And that's kind of how those online videos position each of those steps along the way. When they're exploring, this is what they could be doing right now. They are still thinking about what format they're interested in, whether they want to go off campus or whether they're thinking about an on-campus experience, thinking about terms that work for them. So what's open right now is everything from E22 next summer through E23, or the summer after next academic year. So what falls in between that is the entire 22-23 academic year. Students might be browsing project opportunities, looking at budgets, and obviously looking at location. We want students to think about the whole experience and what works for them, and not just location only, or not just my roommate, my girlfriend, my best friend is going to this place. And I'll explain why we need students to think about that whole opportunity. Just in terms of format, some of you might have seen this slide before, but this is how an off-campus experience works into a student's schedule. So if they're doing an off-campus project, for example, a C-term project, the plan is that they're working only on project material for C-term. So that's that blue block in C-term. In the term prior, they take a social science research methods course and also have a 1/6 PQP. 1/6 is like half a credit or half a course. And that's a placeholder for meeting with their faculty advisors and their team and their sponsors for their specific projects. And in some cases, we also have programs that start with a cultural prep, whether it's a language class or, the group might get together to watch some movies about the location they're going to, or even to just start to, build some group camaraderie. Those cultural preps sometimes happen 2 terms prior and are usually a 1/6 course or non-credit bearing. Sometimes they're just informal get-togethers. If a student chooses to do an on-campus project, this is what their schedule would typically look like. So on-campus projects are spanned over 3 terms. They're seen as 1/3 of the work that students are doing over those 3 terms. So students would take 2 other classes at the same time. And these projects are much more organic. There is not a formal application process for on-campus. In the spring, however, we do hold an on-campus opportunities fair where students can meet advisors who are hosting on-campus projects. So this might be a faculty advisor who has a special interest in a certain area or would like to extend their research or work with maybe some local connections they have on a particular problem that fits the IQP model. So students get connected to those advisors. The advisors build a team that makes sense for the program. And The one thing you'll notice here is that the social science research methods preparation course is not included. So that the methods portion is part of what they will work with that advisor on over the course of these 3 terms. They won't have a formal course as they would for the off-campus experience. So where you can see what's available and start looking is at Plus Global Projects. So the information that feeds into this public facing page does pull from eProjects. The parts that you can't see here are just the budgets and specific housing details. Get in touch with your student if you want to take a look more closely at that. Maybe they could even screen share with you and show you what they see. The next step is preparing and then applying for the experience. So we do encourage students to take time in preparing their application. The application is a 2-step process. So they fill out an application form, and then they'll also fill out a preference form, which I can explain how that preference process works. In the application, they're asked for an updated resume, 2 essays, and then 2 references, one of which is a WPI faculty member. They don't need reference letters. They just need the names of those people. And I know for this sophomore class especially, last year was a hard year to connect with faculty. So what we encourage students to think about is, which faculty did they maybe have smaller classes with? Maybe they went to office hours or, drop-in time. Which faculty did they feel they had the closest connection to? And it's okay if, it was, not as close as they would have wanted it to be for a reference. The way we look at it is the references are contacted only on a case-by-case basis if the reviewer of the application just wants a little more detail. So we encourage students to give the best references they can. They can even use someone back in high school if they feel like they have a better reference. Just one reference needs to be a WPI faculty member. The essays, a preview of the essay questions is posted on our information page, the IQP opportunities page, and the CDC, the Career Center, is also available to help with resume editing. So both of these things, the application and the preference form, are due August 4th by 9 a.m. So if you haven't heard from your student about their starting to do these things, there's still plenty of time. Filling out the form is a 5-minute process. We would encourage students to write the essays, save their resume as a PDF, and then just open up the form, paste their essays in, and upload their resume. What they do want to take some care and time in thinking about is their preferences as well. So the way that we ask IQP, off-campus IQP applicants to share their preferences is in 3 different categories. So as you saw in the previous slide, they have over 60 options available to them for site and term locations. So some of our sites offer multiple terms, and we ask students to give us their preference for each of those site and term options in the categories of very interested, interested, or not interested. So their form will ask them to select a radio button for one of those answers for each of those, for each location in term. Students need to give us at least 3 very interested options and at least 6 in the top categories of very interested and interested. They will not be placed in a place that they indicated as not interested. So the one thing that we advise strongly that students think about is this is their opportunity to think carefully about the locations and the terms available, what works best for them, and they should only list places that they would be happy going to. Of course, there's, a level of happiness within that. Of course, there's always, I hope I get this one. But they should not put anything down within that 6 or more that they would not be happy with. So, when we talk to students about what they're thinking about, there's never a safety involved. There's never, oh, I'll just put this one because if I don't get in, at least I'll get it in somewhere. Every place on there is a possibility. We measure our success and we try as best as we can to match as many students in their very interested category. But given the volume of applicants and the spaces available, that's not always possible. So some students will be placed in their interested category. Last year, we placed over 90% of students in their very interested category, and that is students who had a successful application and were eligible to apply. So over 90% of people who had successful applications were placed in a very interested choice. The other thing that I wanted to mention here, it escaped me, so I'll come back to it. But I'm sure there's some questions here and we can come back to how the preference form works. Let's talk a little bit about finances. So your class year for your student who's in the class of 2024 will receive a scholarship of up to $5,000 towards the Global Projects Program. So all of the off-campus IQP experiences apply as or are eligible as a Global Projects Program. We do have some students who do multiple off-campus experiences. So they might do a humanities project, their IQP and their MQP. It really depends. So that scholarship is available to be credited for one of those off-campus experiences. Most students will probably use it for their IQP. Up to 5,000 means that they will receive, depending on the cost of the program, they'll receive up to 5,000 as a credit towards their bill. And our goal is to have, since this is the first class that has this for all, our goal is to have that scholarship amount listed on eProjects as well, so students can understand what the scholarship will impact. For some locations, the scholarship will be the full $5,000. For others, it may be up to, and some instances of that could include programs that are not, that the expected cost is below 5,000. So, it's up to the cost of the program, including the out-of-pocket cost expense expected and the program fee. So the students will see a billable total for amounts that WPI books for them, like their housing cost on site or language classes or perhaps excursions. And then they'll see a non-billable amount, which is their flights, which they book on their own, any incidentals while on site, transportation costs that they might incur. So those non-billable totals are still included in the overall cost of the program and the overall adjustment that they would see for their scholarship. I want to talk a little bit about how we're responding now and how we always respond with students off campus. And before I go into that, I want to say that we are dedicated to supporting students wherever they are. We're part of the support network here on campus. We attend weekly meetings with the rest of the support staff on campus. We're very closely connected to the Dean of Students Office, the SDCC, and other student support networks. So I want to recognize for myself and for those of you that may have heard as well about a recent loss that we experienced here on campus of yet another student. That hits home. That's hard for us as support staff, and we know it's hard for students, whether they knew those students who passed or whether they just are struggling themselves. So that struggle doesn't go away while students are traveling. And we are available for 24/7 support to the students and faculty who are traveling on our programs. We have seen medical issues, we've seen mental health crises, we've seen, a whole host of things that come up as part of the experience of traveling. We still travel because we know that the experience is worth it, and we know that the skills gained from these off-campus experiences are invaluable. So what we're here to do is support that, support the whole student, support the staff who are going with them, and monitor impacts that could happen to travel. So it's obviously been a hard year. In the 21-22 academic year, we unfortunately didn't have any students that were able to travel off campus. Most students were able to maintain contact with their sponsors. Through virtual connections, they were able to still meet with their sponsors, still work with a project that was focused on the area that they planned to travel to. And that's been the goal for our directors, even for our directors to maintain those relationships with sponsors, because they don't want to lose that relationship for when they are able to go back on site. Where we're resuming project travel on a case-by-case basis. We had Bar Harbor go for this summer, and we currently have our Switzerland, Iceland, and Glacier National Park programs on site right now. So we're working closely with the on-campus resources like the health center and others, the search team, which is the coronavirus emergency response team, to make plans that offer these opportunities in a safe way for our students. There's a lot of factors that come into consideration for international travel, including can we get into those countries? What are the entry requirements? Can we satisfy those requirements? And currently, we are requiring vaccination for students who are on any off-campus program outside of Massachusetts. So those, the monitoring of those world events, whether they be COVID related or otherwise, will continue to happen. That support will continue to happen. And our goal is to resume project travel as soon as it's possible. I do think it's only realistic of me to say that there could be some places that we are not able to travel to throughout the rest of this academic year. In B term, we're going to about half of our locations, and we're starting to consider options for C and D as well. So happy to take questions about that as well, and share where we're at in terms of those, in terms of that planning. So just a reminder for the application timeline, the students will need to submit their application and their preference form by October 4th at 9 a.m. They still have time to complete both of those. Our office is available for in-person or virtual advising sessions. We're also hosting drop-in sessions that will likely be outside in Freeman Plaza, which is right outside of our office, or they can just stop by for a drop-in up in the project center second floor. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then I'm happy to take questions from the chat.
Hi, Erin, thank you. We have quite a few questions here. Our first question is, how do you expect the sophomores to get 2 letters when it was mostly remote? And that's referring to the reference letters
Right.
or the references.
So one needs to be a WPI faculty member. The other can be anyone else who the student feels would be a good reference for them. Somebody back to high school, maybe a staff member that they had a good connection with here on campus. So they just need to think about one faculty. And I would encourage them to think about maybe a smaller class. If they attended GPS, a GPS faculty member would be a great reference. Or if they went to office hours or other ways to connect with faculty, that might be a good shot too.
Thanks, Erin. I just want to add that the students are not required to get letters of reference.
Right.
They just need to give us the name and contact information of someone who will be willing to be a reference for them.
Yes, thanks for clarifying, Deb. It's just names.
Okay, if you would please share how the IQP works if a student is a sophomore but a junior technically in graduation status.
Right. So if they are trying to do an MSBS or maybe graduate in 3 years, they may want to work with academic advising to come up with a plan for how they're fitting their projects into their plan, into their full academic plan. So I have heard of some students that prefer to do IQP in the summer. Summer tuition would apply for that, but it could be a good option for someone who's on an accelerated schedule. Or they may have ways of working an off-campus experience and then an MQP into their plan. If they're a junior by credit, but they plan to be here for 4 years, then they can work their IQP and their MQP into their schedule however they wish. But if they're trying to do an accelerated plan, they might want to think about E or A term, being the first term of their junior year or their 3rd year. And then they could move on to MQP after that.
Thanks. If a student decides after receiving their assignment that they would rather stay local, can they refuse?
Absolutely. So the whole timeline is the students apply by October 4th. Then we have faculty directors who review the applications. Faculty directors review a selection of applications. And then final placements are announced in late December. I believe it's December 21st. So students then have a whole month to decide if they want to accept that placement or decline. And if, that's a long time between October 4th and I believe it's January 21st when they have to give us their final decision. So if plans have changed or they decide they want to stay local, they can decline the off-campus placement that they received and either do an on-campus IQP, or we also offer supplemental application processes throughout the year. So if a student declines their first placement, they could consider reapplying to the off-campus program in another subsequent application cycle. One thing to consider is that the fall cycle is the biggest. The fall cycle is when the most programs are open, but in the supplemental processes, we still do post any available opportunities that are open, and they're just a little more limited. So if a student's still looking for a placement, they still can apply at that time.
Thanks, Erin. It looks like we have a bit of a typographical error on one of our slides. The maximum range cost of our programs is not 8,800K, it's just 8,800. So just to clear up.
Right.
So the next question is, are students picking a project based only on the location, or do they also have access to the project at each location?
So they have an idea on e-projects of the types of projects that have happened there before. The director might provide a summary of the types of projects that they look for. The directors also have videos that they've posted on e-projects where they might go into more detail about the types of sponsors that they work with. And then some of our project centers also have their own websites where they post final project presentation, final project write-ups, and more details about the project experiences. So that's where students could get an idea of the types of projects that students have done in the past. That doesn't mean that the same exact projects will be happening every year. It's really based on, sometimes the directors will set up a schedule where they work with a certain sponsor every other year, or depending on the, how many projects this sponsor is interested in, they might have a sponsor that they work with every year, or there's two teams working on a project with one sponsor. So it depends on the year, but students can get a general idea of the types of work that's done there.
Erin, we have a number of parents who are interested in knowing whether they will be paying for tuition and housing on campus in addition while students are away on an IQP.
Yep. So the off-campus IQP is a 9-credit experience. It's a full term. So regular tuition does apply for that term. Housing is really up to the individual. By junior year, some students are living off campus, so they might have an off-campus apartment that they're already leasing with some friends. If they're living on campus, they would still pay for the semester that they're away. They'd have a reduction in their meal plan, but they would still pay for the housing for that term. Just because, like an off-campus apartment, they're just gone for 7 weeks.
Thanks. Is a student's GPA part of the criteria for selection?
Great question. So GPA is a consideration for selection, but it is not the only consideration. And there's no GPA requirement for any off-campus program. Students need to be in good academic standing, or they can apply if they're on academic warning. But we highly encourage them to use a section on the application, which is called academic history, where they can explain a little bit more about why are they currently on academic warning, what are they doing to bring that up? And, there's many different reasons. Maybe the student changed majors, maybe virtual learning was not a good environment for them last year. There's lots of reasons, and it's very helpful for the reviewer to understand what happened and why a student might have, a term that looks like it didn't work out well, or why a student might be on warning. If they're on academic probation, they're not eligible to apply until that status comes back up. And they can come talk with our office about that. That's really based on the fact that we want them to focus on academics and bringing that up first. And then once they're back to good academic standing, we can talk to them about going off campus. But just to kind of, share all of the factors, GPA is considered, the content and the quality of their essays, the teamwork experience that they're able to demonstrate in their resume. And then another kind of element of their academic history is just their consistency in passing classes. So that comes down to, addressing maybe a term that didn't work out well or something like that. Language ability is also taken into account, though not necessary or required. some directors would like to have at least some students who have language ability, especially in our programs in China and our programs in South and Central America. Some Spanish ability is helpful, some Chinese language ability is helpful. So if students have that even back from high school, it can be helpful to indicate that on their application.
Erin, where is the list of 60 programs or countries options to review as a parent? So is there somewhere we can parents?
So on our on the link for off-campus programs, which is if you Google WPI Global Projects Program, you can get to the Project Center directory. That lists the terms available for each. Deb, I'm going to ask you, do we have a worksheet that we could post somewhere, or do we already do that for students somewhere?
We do have a spreadsheet of all of the options, and we linked it in the last newsletter.
Okay.
Linked to it in the last newsletter. So we do have that, and we can make that available. It is currently
awesome.
In the newsletter.
And we share our weekly newsletters on our IQP page. So I'm going to put that link into the chat, and if it's not there already, we can post that last newsletter on the IQP page. Thanks.
Okay, we really need to know about the flights and if the $5,000 covers that too.
So the $5,000, now I'm trying to do two things at once. Sorry, everybody. I just want to put this link into the chat. The $5,000, the up to $5,000 is a credit that shows up on the student's bill for the semester that they're traveling. So the students would see the program fee associated with their location, and then the credit for their global scholarship. The scholarship is adjusted based on the cost of the billable and the non-billable costs. So the program fee and then any other out-of-pocket costs. And the flights are part of the out-of-pocket costs. You know, everybody has a different way of paying for and booking their flights. So we leave that to the students to book. And some students may end up with a credit on their account after the program fee and the global scholarship are posted. And they could request a refund for that credit after the whole bill is paid off for that semester. So, you know, to kind of answer that question most succinctly, you will pay for the flights out of pocket. You know, the student and family should expect to pay for the flights out of pocket. But you may end up with a credit that you can request a refund for to essentially pay yourself for the student back for the flights afterwards.
Thanks, Erin. And this is sort of related, and what is included in those costs? Housing and airfare and...
Yep. Let me dive in and show a program. Does that sound okay, Deb?
Sure.
I'm going to look at our Thailand program as long as e-projects. So I'm going to give you the insider look into e-projects. So here's what e-projects looks like for the students. And I went right to a program page, but before they get here, they also have the opportunity to filter and browse the programs available to them. This is our Bangkok, Thailand Center, and here's a video that they can watch from the director of the program. And then at the bottom, they can see the cost. This is associated with this year's program. Here's the cost associated with the 22-23 program, which runs in C23. So you'll see the housing and program fee, which is $27.54. That is the billable subtotal. So that is the cost that would show up on the student's WPI bill for the semester they're going, which in this case is spring 23. Everything else, including round trip transportation, on-site costs, commuting costs, meals, incidentals, and then IQP project incidentals, materials that they might need for their project, those are considered the non-billable costs, which in this case is $2,500. So the expected costs in total for Thailand is $52.54. And then students would receive up to $5,000 towards this experience. The adjustment for the scholarship is not, like I said, we're going to try and have the scholarship amount posted here as well. The adjustment doesn't always mean that, if it's over 5,000, they get a flat 5,000. It's based on the cost of it's based on the program fee and then a travel stipend that is part of this, that is part of these costs here. So in the case of Thailand, I believe that the scholarship would not be a full 5,000. It would be based on the calculation of the program fee and the travel stipend. But we'll try and have that information posted as well.
Thanks, Erin.
Yep.
What percentage of students, this is a little confusing, I think. What percentage of students get on campus if they aren't matched to any very interested or interested category? So I think it might be kind of two questions in one there.
Yeah. What I can say is that there is a very small percentage of students who are not able to be placed on the program. Sometimes it happens. And in most cases, the reason it happens is because students were not able to give us enough flexibility in their preferences and perhaps didn't have a strong application that contributed to getting placed on one of the places that they indicated they were interested in. So, for example, if a student only gives us preferences in places that are often that, many people are also interested in going to, there's only 24 spaces on each program. So if they're only interested in places that everyone is also interested in, there's less of a likelihood that we'll be able to place them, especially if they don't have a strong application. If they can kind of think about all the opportunities and maybe consider some of the options that are not as frequently, that, not as many people are placing in their very interested category, they will have a better chance of placement. So we do advise students on kind of how to think about those things. We give them some reference points of programs that are typically highly rated and, are happy to talk through, their strategy of how they think about their interest in the program. So that sort of is to answer why would a student not be placed on the off-campus IQP. If they're not placed on the off-campus IQP, then it would be up to them what they want to do next. They could explore an on-campus project at the Spring Opportunities Fair, or they could reapply to the off-campus program when we repost space that's available.
So it's sort of related to this. What percentage of students that apply for the IQP are accepted?
Yes, so 95% of students who apply are accepted to the program as long as they are eligible academically and as long as they have enough credits to be a sophomore.
Thanks, Erin.
Mhm.
Is housing provided if students go abroad, or do they need to find their own housing?
Housing is provided, and we do require students live in the WPI provided housing.
When mentioning e-term 2022 or e-term 2023, does that mean both the E1 and E2 summer terms or just one of those?
So we have it indicated on the preference form for students. We are recruiting for E22, summer 22, and E23 or summer 23. So on the preference form, we have both of those terms listed.
I think also in response to the E1 or E2, we don't specifically hold to the E1 or E2 with some of our programs. The program dates differ, and they could be held in E1 at the start of the summer and further into the summer, which is not technically E2 or E1. There might be different program dates.
Yeah.
I think that was part of the question.
Oh, I see. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. If cost is an issue for families, does WPI offer a comprehensive site list based on cost?
We have offered a list in the past. We had it at the Global Fair, so we can work with financial aid and post that online.
Thanks, Erin.
Mm-hmm.
How will a student know if the IQP is going to be in person or virtual? This parent's son has had some friends doing virtual and not enjoying it at all.
Yeah, it's hard to know, to tell you the honest truth. Like I said, we were in Bar Harbor this summer. We're currently in Iceland, Switzerland, and Glacier right now, and we have about half of our programs running in B-term. We have treated each program on a case-by-case basis. We do have some groups that are staying virtual in B-term because the sponsors are willing and want to remain virtual with the groups. We do have a couple programs in B-term where remaining virtual was not possible. And in those cases, we actually were able to consider alternative locations. So we have two locations that could not travel, but are now going to Puerto Rico. So we may consider that in the future. My hope is that by E23, we'll be going to most locations, and we've learned a lot about how to make those programs run, and kind of watching the entry requirements. If you saw that the US is reopening travel for vaccinated travelers for like 33 countries. I think we'll see some reciprocity there at some point, as we continue through this pandemic in terms of entry restrictions.
So we have another COVID related question. Due to COVID life changes, their resumes would be pretty blank for current activities and work. This is causing stress for some students, having to write out what they've been doing. Can students list things like hosted a Minecraft server?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not exactly sure what a Minecraft server is, but I think if it involved, getting, it sounds like an event that they probably hosted. And if they did, there's lots of reasons that applies to ideas of working on a team, or the role that they played in bringing that together. So yeah, be creative in terms of where what I would encourage the students to think about is, where did they work on something with others? whether it was in class, if they, even if they worked on a virtual team for something, they could put classwork as part of their resume experience. And if they're strapped for thinking about ideas, they should go to the CAC, the Career Center, which is in the Project Center on the first floor, because I know the CDC would be happy to brainstorm on how to talk about their experience.
Thanks, Erin. Can you please clarify the difference between the application process for students staying on campus versus off campus?
So the application process for the off-campus program is open right now. And that's the process that we walked through in terms of a resume and essay, references, and then the preference form. There is not a formal application process for on-campus IQPs. The faculty directors of those on-campus IQPs do post their information on e-projects as well, and then they invite students to contact them directly. They may ask the students for some more information, or in some cases maybe a resume, but it's really up to the advisor for that on-campus IQP versus the process we do for off-campus, which is much more structured.
Thanks, Erin. We have a couple, I think we need to clarify the e-term a little bit more. We have a few questions in here about the e-term. If a student wants to do an IQP in E1 to 2 terms, do they do that in the summer of 22 or the summer of 23? I think we have a couple of people who are asking similar questions, and it just needs to be re-clarified, I believe.
Yeah, so we do have, there are 2 terms in the summer. In the WPI has courses that are offered in E1 and E2. The summer programs, the summer off-campus programs, do not always fit perfectly into E1 or E2. The dates are posted on e-projects, and so students can kind of see generally where that program falls. For example, London, the summer London program and the summer Worcester Mass program happen right after the end of the term, May to late June. Some of the other programs run a little bit later, like Bar Harbor doesn't start until a little bit later in the summer. I believe Beijing is usually a little bit later. So students should just look at the dates in e-projects for clarification about when that program runs, and obviously be thinking about conflicts like internships or other work experiences.
Erin, and related to this, are the e-term sessions for students who've just finished their sophomore year, or for students who finished their junior year, or either?
That's a great question. It's either. So a student who just finished their sophomore year may find they'll be taking that social science research methods course this academic year. They'll be taking that in D term. So students are very capable of doing that. They may find that it's more writing intensive than the other courses that they've had at WPI. It's heavily team-based, so they're going to have out-of-class time with their team and meetings to schedule with their teammates. But we do offer it for sophomores as well. If students feel like it's a little too early to have that experience, they can wait until after their junior year, which would be, for most of these students, E23. And then they would not take the social science research methods course until D23. But it's open to both.
So wondering about housing, if living in an on-campus dorm, do students remain assigned to that dorm while they are attending the IQP?
Yes, they do. So if they're living on campus, just like an off-campus apartment, where they would have a lease for the year, they would still have a lease for that room, for the term that they're gone. And they can keep their stuff there.
We still have questions about the link to the project center.
We have about 3 minutes, Deb. So
Yeah,
I'm wondering if
let's see.
some
I
of
know.
these,
Some of them. We have, oh, one of the questions is, can an RA be a reference, one of the references?
sure. I think that would be great, as a second reference. They still need a faculty member, but as a second reference.
Also, is there a waiting list?
So we do not have a waiting list. If a student if we can't offer a placement to a student, we would encourage them to reapply in any of the supplemental cycles or to seek an on-campus IQP.
Are students allowed to change their selections locations after they accept?
So if they accepted and then decided later that they didn't want to go or couldn't go to that place, they would have to withdraw from their placement and reapply. And once travel is back up and running on a regular schedule, we do have a cancellation schedule that we make very clear to students in terms of the withdrawal deadlines for our programs. So keeping in mind that E and A terms, we begin preparations for those programs pretty much immediately after acceptance. So when they accept, they should really be confident that they want to go. B term has until about March or April to withdraw without a cancellation penalty. And then C and D terms a little bit later in the year. But they will have time, and obviously plans change. So they will have time to withdraw if something changes.
So Erin, we just have a few questions about popular sites. What are the most popular sites? And do the best applicants get into those sites based on the applications? Yeah,
so and I think we'll wrap it up with this one. Just keeping in mind that there's for the majority of programs, there's 24 spaces, 24 students, 2 faculty. So we don't have space for everyone. And there are some programs where a lot of people are interested in, which is why we ask students to think about at least their top 6 choices, if not more. So some programs, we will have over 300 students who have listed that program as very interested. So that means out of those 350 students, we can only place 24 of them in that very interested category. It's not linear, we're not, placing those people and then moving on to the next section. We are looking for the best fit for the student and for what the faculty director is interested in building their cohort. So we are doing those matches based on the best fit for, like I said, the student and the faculty member. So if a student only gives us places where there are 350 other students who also are very interested in that place, that's where it could be difficult to place them. There may be some other sites where there's 150 people who have marked it as very interested. And if you do the math, the likelihood of getting one of those 24 spaces is higher in a place like that than it is in some of the more highly rated places. So we tell students, we don't mean to say that they should not put the places that they're interested. If they have been really thinking about South Africa or Melbourne, Australia, they should absolutely still put those places down. they should just consider all of the options available to them. And, you know, if they're really struggling with that, they can come talk to our office to think about the term that works best for them, or terms, the location, the projects that they're interested in, you know, to think about the whole picture. And there may be some places that pop out that they didn't even realize they would be interested in. So it's not to say don't put them, it's just to understand that if all 6 are some of those highly rated places, placement could be a little harder. And I think we'll wrap up there, Deb. I believe it's possible to copy the questions in the chat. I see a thank you as well. If there's anything we didn't get to, we will follow up with Maureen Maynard. Maybe she can post some things on the parents' Facebook page, or send a follow-up if there's something that we weren't able to get to. Otherwise, thank you and have a good afternoon.